Good morning, everyone. I'm in sunny and beautiful Bangalore, and I wish we were all in the same space, but it's so fascinating how technology has become such a massive unifier, and all of us can connect remotely. Karan and I will walk you through building fintech brands that people trust. And I've deliberately underlined the word trust because isn't that the North Star that we all aspire for, whether it's in our relationships as a leader or in the businesses and brands we build? I thought before we start, I would start with a small anecdote from my life. When I was a child, my grandfather used to quip and joke and tell me that a banker is someone who will give you an umbrella when it's sunny and take it away when it's raining. And I always remember that joke, and it sort of underlines the primacy and importance of trust, and especially for finance brands where, it is at possibly the highest point of need. And when it comes to money, which is supremely important. And just to build on that anecdote a little further, fast forward a couple of decades, I just passed out of IIM Calcutta. I had met the man I was going to marry in campus. And I went to my grandfather and said, Dada, I found the person I want to marry. And, genuinely, he asked me only one question. He said, where does he work? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell him he works in a bank. And I said, he works for Grindlay's Bank, which, was very active at that point. And he looked at me and said, that's a good bank. You can marry him. And I was, shuddering to think that what if he didn't trust the bank? Would he have said no to the alliance? But, jokes apart, it really talks about how do we begin to build the financial brands of the future, and really how critical and pervasive and important trust is in the entire equation. Before we talk about trust, I thought I'll talk about something that's very dear to my heart, which is the importance of brands. And I think brand is a much misunderstood subject. Very often I've seen people say, we own this brand. We do not own brands. Brands are owned and exist in the minds and hearts of consumers. And this was really made and brought alive to me when I attended a session by a South African scientist and researcher called Jan Hofmeyr. And as a marketer, I can tell you there's nothing more interesting than actually peeking into the brain of a consumer. And he showed us these brain maps, which I have recreated just to tell you a story. But he showed us a map of a brain, which you see here, which is a consumer drinking Coca-Cola, and the consumer doesn't know she's drinking Coca-Cola. And you can see what's not to like, right? The reptilian brain, the amygdala is lit up, it's sweet, it's sugary, and, the consumer's obviously, the human being is enjoying the Coke. And then he showed us a brain map of a consumer, the same consumer, when the consumer was told that this is Coca-Cola. And the brain lights up like a Christmas tree. These are all the multiple, manifold associations of brand Coca-Cola. It could be the last time I had Coke in Christmas or Diwali, or my first date with Coke, or, when I took that hot summer trek and I opened a Coke and refreshed myself. And this is really the power of a brand. The brand is every single association, experience, idea that the consumer holds about your product or service. And therefore, it is the ultimate intellectual property. It is the ultimate abstract concept, because we don't own brands. You can see by this map that brands exist in the minds, and some would say the hearts and souls of our consumers. And were you to decimate every last factory of Coca-Cola, the brand would still exist as long as a single consumer continues to exist. And nothing has brought this alive for me as much as this brain map, that, in the factory, as someone said, we build products, but really, the consumer and the hope and the brand exists in the minds of consumers. So very simply put, brand is a product or service in the minds of your consumers. And so much of fintech and finance is service. And it reminds me of what the CEO of Southwest Airlines said, which is, my job is to manage 1 million moments of truth, right? Because every single association, every single experience with a brand can either build a brand deposit, to use financial language, or deplete from that deposit. as Jeff Bezos said, and he has a way with words, as we all know, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's also what they called reputation. And reputation and brand is a long game. There is nothing more important. It is so difficult to build. It's so easy to lose. And it's really the prerogative and it's the mission of the senior most people in an organization. Everyone holds brand, but I would say the only thing you cannot delegate as a leader is brand and possibly culture. Everything else can and should be delegated. So moving on to another framework, and you'll see a lot of frameworks here in the next 20 minutes, but moving to the next framework, a way to think about brands is almost a way to think about leadership. And we all know leaders. Brand is a confluence of love and respect. We all know leaders we love. We all know leaders we respect. But there are very few leaders who both inspire love and command respect. It's a Martin Luther King, the Mahatma Gandhi, the APJ Kalam. And all of us aspire for that North Star of love and respect. And very quickly, if you look at what's on low love and low respect, right? This is where brands go to die. This is commodities, where the only differentiator is price. And really, it's like a death knell for marketers, right? Very hard to build a business. Then you have high love and low respect, and that's fads, right? It tends to be youth-oriented businesses, restaurants, sort of very fatty businesses, fashion. And I would suspect a lot of new fintech brands may fall into the fad quadrant and are looking to break into this quadrant. 80% of products and services are what we would call a trademark. You like it, you respect it, you recognize it, you even buy it. But will you wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go and buy that next version of an iPhone that you kind of know you don't need, but you know you want? And that's really a love mark, which is how do you hit the high ground of both love and respect? And that is really what every brand aspires for. And this is really the zone of trust, right? Which is super important. Scott Galloway, someone I really respect and follow, says brand is Latin for irrational margin. And I know with the number of finance people on the call, all of you will resonate with the idea of margin, but brand really helps you build the deepest moat that helps you command the highest premium, right? And if you get it right, it's enduring and it really creates a force multiplier in terms of profitability. The question to ask is, this is the Interbrand list of the top 100 brands in the world. We are a region of 1 billion people, right? India, and we don't have a single brand in the top 100. And that I think is a tragedy, right? And you have about 7 fintech brands here or finance brands from banks to cards. And one of the reasons I joined Sequoia is I fundamentally believe in the power of India to create game-changing global brands. And I believe if you look at this list 10 years out, you will have multiple brands from this region. I've been very privileged in the last 2 years to work with 7 to 8 fintech brands as part of our portfolio. And I firmly believe that 1 or 2 of them will definitely make this list in the next decade. And I would say 2030, 2040, 2050, this list will be dominated by brands from our region. But really, what does it take to build, a stellar brand? And fundamentally, trust is at the core. And the question is, what is trust, right? And trust is like love. It's so hard. You know it when you see it, but it's super hard to define. And, someone had this definition which says, trust is a confluence of intention and competence. Do I trust where you're coming from, which is your intention? And do I trust you can deliver? One is not enough. I may trust where you're coming from, but if I don't trust you can deliver, I don't fully trust you. I may trust you can deliver, but if I don't trust your intention or your ethics or your morality, I don't fully trust you. So like love and respect, love is almost a confluence or a surrogate for intention, and respect is a surrogate for competence. But it is a combination of these two. And as we build our brands, we need to think about, are we really creating the right intent? And are we sort of matching our promise with our actions? And I always tell brands I work with, don't promise too much. But what you promise, deliver. Because a broken promise is broken trust. And that's super hard to regain, right? And unfortunately, bad news travels more than good news. So if you break trust with the consumer, you find that consumer will talk to 7 times more consumers than if you keep trust with the consumer. But the good news is if you repair a broken trust relationship, that consumer will talk to more consumers than either a positive consumer or a negative consumer. So you can rebuild trust, but it's hard. So trust is a confluence of intention and competence. And this is an Edelman study which talks about trust in global institutions. Again, a confluence of ethics and competence. And interestingly, globally, there's not a single institution that holds trust. So you see the ethics and competence quadrant is curiously blank. Business is high on competence, but seem to be under indexing on ethics. NGOs is the opposite, high on ethics and under indexing competence. Media and government on a global level, sadly, is low on both. India is very different. We tend to have higher trust in institutions and interestingly lower trust in individuals. So that brings a peculiar, interesting predicament for India. But again, the North Star for us as institutions and brands and people and leaders and in everything we do is how do we both build trust, which is our intention, as well as our ability to deliver, which is the competence. And it's especially important when you talk about money. I would say trust is most important when you talk about money and when you talk about love. And, Agatha Christie said that, never trust a person with vast amounts of money. Shakespeare, who I absolutely revere, said a fool and his money are soon parted. So this is certainly an area, which is why finance brands are so core in terms of if you build trust, it's actually the deepest moat you can ever build because it is perhaps the most important area where we can make a difference and super important in the arena of money. And this is a conference, a workshop I recently attended by Stephen Covey, again, who I deeply respect, where he talks about 13 behaviors of high trust leaders. And again, it's a confluence. Remember the 2 things, love and respect, ethics and competence, character and competence is how Stephen Covey classifies this. And if you look at this chart, and by all means, please take a screenshot of this and buy his latest book. But he talks about very simple things. It's what we can all do as leaders. It's what we can all do as brands. Are we talking straight? I mean, there's so much mumbo jumbo these days, right? But are we just talking straight? Are we respecting people regardless of level? Do we create an environment of transparency? Do we fight for what is right? Do we show loyalty? Or are we like the banker that takes the umbrella away when it rains? Do we deliver on what we say, right? Do we get better, like progress? Do we confront reality? Do we clarify expectations? Do we practice accountability, delivering what we say? Importantly, do we listen? How many brands out there listen? I think customer relationships has become so transactional in the world. And brands that will win in the future, brands that listen. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But how often do we actually go there and listen? Listen without prejudice, listen without bias, truly listen to each other. Do we keep our commitments? If I say I'm going to do this, my word is everything. I don't need a contract. And I'm not saying about myself, I'm talking about, that's something I aspire to, but high trust leaders, right? Your word is enough. And we live in a day and age where trust has become transactional, and it can be the deepest differentiator. Trust, reputation, brand, these are long-term things. It's not unique to finance, but it's even more important in finance, right? It's super complex. It's the deepest industry. And how do you have a brand that stands out and stands for something big? Look at this. This is the ocean of brands out there, right? And it's super hard to differentiate. And this is what I call my first Gayatri mantra, which is differentiation is not enough. You have to disrupt. The first thing I learned as a marketer in P&G was differentiation is about creating and communicating a difference. But sometimes creating and communicating a difference is not enough. you need to disrupt to even stand out of this ocean of sameness. And I want to talk about the brand tenets, which is 10 commandments of brand building in fintech, or, what I call the Gayatri mantras of brand building in fintech, right? The 10 commandments that are super important to build brands and cut through. The first is, and I'm going to go rapid fire through this, but be unmissable, disrupt. And how do you build a community? Because, it's interesting. We live in the 21st century, but the most trusted person is still the person you know. So word of mouth and community is even more important than it's ever been. Very interesting example of a finance brand called Monzo, which is basically a consumer created brand. Even when they launched their brand and tried to decide on the name, they had 100,000 people come in to say, what should the name be called? So super important to make the consumer part of the discussion. We live in a very opaque world, and finance is very complex for the non-finance person. So how do you create simplicity in design that sort of creates a category? And I think no one does it better than Cred. I'm so impressed with what Harish has done on design and building a brand. And they have copywriters write notifications so that you don't forget a notification. Everything is elevated to an high art, right? And you can obscure the logo and still know which is this brand that's talking to you. Really, I think one of the best examples in the country of very bold, compelling design identity. Again, people find finance a little boring, complex, opaque. How do you gamify it? So as you pay, no one's done it better than Klarna. I know they're facing a bit of rough weather right now, as everyone is with the markets. But, shopping is a high friction and high stress activity, and they took the stress away and they made it smooth and gamified it and made it interesting. How do you create, I genuinely believe that India is leading the path globally on finance and, the kind of innovations we have in our country. And I'm so excited to say that, we have a program in Sequoia called Surge, and we look at early stage companies, and 40% of the companies in a Surge cohort are building for the world. So we're going to have a lot of Indian brands in that chart, right? Which is so exciting. So how do you build brands that are truly global? A great example is Payoneer, that's in 200 markets, and they've really created a brand system. They've literally taken every color in the spectrum in the rainbow because they stand for universal finance and they speak every language in this world. So when we create brands, we need to think global from day one. Create a community that helps you build and augment the brand. I think Cred does it really well. TransferWise is rebranded as Wise. And it's really become this flag that, every consumer wears very proudly, and they've created a movement in finance. Dare to be different, embrace your you. Tink has done a great job about really, this is a brand from Visa that really talks about data being being very primal in terms of connecting with and understanding consumers. Create simplicity. There's too much complexity in the world. I think there was a philosopher that said that I will give, for the simplicity on this side of complexity, I care a fig, but I will give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. And that's what we must all aspire for. And look at MasterCard. I mean, what a marketing genius. It's all about money, but they're everything but money, right? They say, there are moments in your life which are priceless, and everything else can be paid for by MasterCard. But this is stuff that money can't buy. So imagine a money brand actually talking about what money can't buy. And that is the genius of this brand. It's connected with the most deep emotion, which is love and connection. And there's nothing more important than that. How do you create a standout brand through seamlessness and simplicity? Alipay did a great job with this. Super simple, but hats off to Razorpay. What an amazing seamless product. It's become the default way to pay, and just built out of not through high CACs or high marketing cost or IPL campaigns, but fundamentally a very seamless consumer experience that makes you trust the brand and give your details and give your, to a level that, which is amazing, which really speaks to the power of this brand. Keep it simple. It's a complex, opaque world, and be invitational. Be inclusive, invite people. Coinbase talked about the future of money a decade back and has sort of heralded the Web3 world. And back home, with the Grow team has done is incredible. We've done consumer research that said that there was a stereotype of what an investor looks like, but Grow's changed that, right? You see this boy, this teenager in his shorts, or this woman, which really sort of fights the stereotype that you need to be a man in a suit to invest. And it really is democratizing the world of investment. But more important than all of this is building a brand on the foundation of purpose. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why can endure anyhow," right? And fundamentally, most brand communication is around the what, which is transactional. You need to go deep into the why, which is transformational. Apple has done it better than anyone else. A why is putting a stake in the ground and saying, here's what I believe. Okay? It's not a truism. It's not something that everyone can believe, right? But it is a belief, which means, and Simon Sinek talks about the fact that in a pre-digital era, thousands of people came to listen to Martin Luther King. They didn't come to listen to Martin Luther King. They came because they believed what he believed. So if you put your belief out there, those who share your beliefs will follow you. And that's leadership, which is centered on belief. So Apple talks about everything we do. We believe in challenging the status quo. Not everyone believes in challenging the status quo. There's some who say the status quo is great. Now, maybe they should buy Hewlett Packard. But there are folks who believe that the status quo should be disrupted. And those are the Apple acolytes, right? Airbnb, the best brands create a myth, destroy boundaries. Travel was all about escape. Airbnb told us travel can be about belonging. It can be about feeling at home. Cred, everyone talks about their great campaigns. Kunal is undoubtedly, and Trupti as well, marketing geniuses, right? But core to Cred is their ideology. They believe that the good guys should win. They believe that for too long, the trustworthy are sort of compromised in a low trust society. So how do you create a community that is of the trustworthy? And Kunal always said, I don't want to be a verb. It's not cred karo, but it's not everybody gets it. It's a gated community, which is all about trust. And even before he did his first fundraise, he tweeted on Twitter saying, here's what I want to do. And this is so important. The founder of a company is a chief brand officer. This is not a role you can delegate. So creating a purpose-centered brand, the work I think all of us did together, Gaurav, Karan, Arwal, Venture 3, all of us working together to say, what is the mission of Cred Avenue and how do we take that purpose and make it something bigger? And Gaurav was always very clear that, the biggest opportunity is we're sort of underbanked and there's an underpenetration of credit in the country. And his belief always was that, credit has to be ubiquitous. So it, like water or air or power, like how do we ensure that everyone has access to credit as a life force? This is super, super, super important as an unlock for society. And so that led us to Yubi. And Yubi really is all about how do you make credit ubiquitous? It sort of connects the lender, the borrower, and the consumer in this sort of propulsive life force that creates an unlock of potential and possibility. The why is about, we believe access to credit is a fundamental right, and it will lead to the transformation of society, creating a ubiquitous, transparent, and responsible infrastructure that funds growth. And it's a world's first possibility platform because money is what money does, and that's the important thing to focus on. The values are collaboration. It's about flow. It's about less friction. It's about transparency, a world beyond trust. It's about equitable. It's about removing the barriers to growth and reimagining a world powered by finance, a world fueled by growth and boundless innovation, the power of three, because together we can. And that's all about go get great, right? So this is a summary of the tenets. I'm sorry it's been like super rapid fire, but I hope that this has given you a glimpse of what it takes to build purpose-centered brands. And I just want to end with a slide that talks about, one of my favorite stories, something I heard where there was this disciple learning from a monk, how do you walk on water? And he spent like 1 year learning all the mantras of walking on water. And then the monk decided his work was done. He got on his little boat and paddled away. And the disciple came running on the water and he said, teacher, I forgot mantra number 33. the commandment number 33. And the teacher looked at him and said, it doesn't matter, you're walking on water. So even if you forget everything, as long as you understand the principles, you will find your own way there. You will find your own path to building something that outlives you, that is authentic, that creates trust and creates a brand that we can all as a nation. Because when you win at that level, it's not your win. It's all of our win. It's a country win, right? And we can all celebrate in it. So more power to you, and over to Karan, who will talk us through how he and his team have really made this brand come to life. And it's really the beginning of a journey, but I'm super impressed with what they're trying to do, and more power to you and everyone in this virtual room to build great brands. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I think thanks, Gayatri, for the fantastic session. It was like a crash course in strategic marketing in 25 minutes. I totally enjoyed it. I'm very sure, folks from the Fintech, the BFSI space and all the other people on the call also learned a lot from that, right? Amazing frameworks were discussed. And, in our journey, in our transformation, as some of you would have noticed from Cred Avenue to Yubi, we tried to incorporate many such frameworks, build a real purpose around our brand. And I think I just spent a few minutes talking about, the journey which we have taken in the last couple of days, 2 weeks to be precise. Gayatri spoke about the purpose, right? The Simon Sinek's model of, creating a purpose. So for us, I'll just summarize, in a couple of seconds. It all started with our why. And the why is that there's a genuine belief that access to credit is a fundamental right, for the realization of opportunity and transformation of society. We truly believe in the power of human potential, and every day, us here at Yubi get energized by the fact that whatever we are doing, whatever we are building, is actually going to transform lives of people eventually. And which comes to our how, which is of creating a ubiquitous, transparent, and responsible infrastructure that makes it happen. Right, which is then coming to what, and as Gayatri mentioned, a lot of companies know their what, and some companies know their how, but very few know the why. And it's always great to arrive at your what by first knowing your why and then your how. Right. So what we are building is actually the world's first possibility platform, which is powered and it's powering the discovery, investment, and fulfillment of credit. With this, we'll come to a couple of important brand choices which we made in our journey, right? So one of the frameworks on actually building an architecture. And what you've seen that we are building a platform, right? Which is pretty much like building a very strong mother brand, and we'll have multiple product lines supporting the mother brand. I'll share this more in the coming slides, but primarily there are 4 broad ways of building brands, right? There's a house of brands approach, which, the FMCG companies have been following, building smaller brands which are fulfilling particular needs. Then we have endorsed brands, which talk about, like we have the example of Marriott, where there's an endorsement by the mother brand, and you have supported independent brands. There's a sub-brands approach. But more importantly, for Yubi, we chose to go with the branded house approach, similar to FedEx, where we have the mother brand and then we have the supporting product lines. And every time we spend or we market the product lines, it strengthens the mother brand and vice versa. So that's something which works very well for a platform in approach in the fintech ecosystem, which we are taking. And when I talk about the branded house approach, I'll just talk about the current product lines. Obviously, we at Yubi are on a very ambitious and arduous journey to, create the entire ecosystem for that. So these are some of the product lines and how they are flowing beautifully from the mother brand, into and bringing together the entire ecosystem. Now, I'll just spend a few minutes on the world's first possibility platform and how it's coming to life, right? So we are trying to power possibilities through frictionless finance. And what does it mean for people on this call specifically? We have representation from the entire ecosystem. So what does it actually mean for enterprises? And as Gopal sir also mentioned, the aspect of nation building it's super critical for us to reach the 5 trillion and then eventually the 50 trillion economy which we want to build for the country. So for enterprises, what we are trying to do is ensure that access to credit for every size of the organization is enabled via our platform. So we have two product lines called Yubi Loans, which is the largest corporate loan marketplace, where we help raise capital 5x faster and at competitive rates, because we have 750 lenders on the platforms and we guarantee multiple AOIs once you are on the platform. Similarly, we have Yubi Flow, which is to meet all the supply chain finance and trade finance needs, again, through a platform approach, which makes things very, very convenient, fast, and affordable for the enterprises. So what does it mean for the lenders? In our case, again, for lenders, we have around 4 offerings, but starting with Yubi Co-Lend, which is our flagship product of sorts in a way, it's an end-to-end co-lending ecosystem, which offers discovery, operations, and monitoring modules for for banks, NBFCs to lend together better and grow the loan books exponentially. We also have Yubi Pools, which is our product line where we are simplifying securitization for the industry. And as you would see in the brand spectrum, these are all coming together as strong independent product lines, but adding to the Yubi mother brand. For HNIs, family offices, and wealth managers, we have introduced Yubi Invest, and we will be talking more about it in the coming days. But primarily, we are building the largest fixed income platform in the country with a very strong market share, and we have already facilitated more than 13,000 crores of investments through the platform. And this will go into retail, and we'll be very happy to talk about it when the time is right. Wherein we transform ourselves not just from a B2B brand to B2B2C as well as B2C in the coming days, to totally attack the entire debt ecosystem in its entirety. And while talking about the entire debt life cycle, we also have Spocto, which is a comprehensive platform for monitoring, preventing, and reducing delinquencies and enabling an AI-driven debt resolution journey. We have Compository in our fold now, which is enabling best-in-class credit decisioning, to power prudent investing and lending decisions and comprehensive due diligence. And just a sneak peek into one of our upcoming products, which you will hear very soon in the media. Now, quickly talking about how we took it to brand to the market. Most of you would have seen, us taking pole positions in key financial dailies, which is where majority of our audience is. And coming back to the framework which Gayatri mentioned, right, the respect and love, right? So while one can get respect by being present and saying the right things at the right time, but what we'll mention as well is that it actually boils down to the love, right? We can measure what happened, what this all led to. And there are metrics quantitatively to say that the media loved it. We had 100+ media mentions talking about the change and how it will impact and make a big change in the fintech ecosystem. And of course, 8x growth in leads and close to 5 million views on the YouTube channel, and uplift in branded searches, which is just the beginning, right? Because it's the beginning of a purpose-driven brand, which is fulfilling all the 10 important tenets of brand building. But most importantly, it boils down to customer love. What matters is when actually our customers, our prospects reached out to us and shared the love that, it's not just the respect, it's not just the awareness, but it's the love that gets generated because what we are doing is resonating with people. And people want to join the movement of transforming debt markets in India and benefiting themselves and their organizations in the process. So I think without further ado, this is broadly a sneak peek which we wanted to give you on the learnings from the from the brand charter and how we have just made some baby steps and seeing this come out. And I'm very sure and I'm happy to have one-on-ones with the ecosystem players on how we can also help create, as Gayatri mentioned, many more fintech brands becoming top 100 power brands in the decades to come. So thanks for that, and thanks everyone.